Hey, everybody, welcome to Beyond the Podium. I'm Bob Roll. I'll be joined by Christian Vande. Today, we are previewing Paris-Nice. It starts the 3rd of March, 9:10 Eastern. Set your alarm clocks, especially if you're on the West Coast. We're going to get into Paris-Nice preview just now, the GC contenders, the key stages, and of course, a great field of sprinters. But before all of that, we're going to talk big headlines from the off-season. Christian, I have a couple of headlines I'd like to get to, but for you, what's the biggest headline from the previous offseason? I have been growing my beard out for quite a few weeks, but beyond that, what's your big headline?
Well, thank you for addressing the beard, Santa. It's good to see. I hope the North Pole's okay. Uh, yeah, the biggest headline by a long shot has to be Primoz Roglic going over to Bora. And I think all the fans, at least us at home, is happy to see that juggernaut be split up just a little bit. Having him, Jonas, oh yeah, and by the way, Sepp Kuss, all on the same team, winning all 3 Grand Tours in 1 year. It's became a little bit too much about a monopoly. So I think we're all happy to see these big two guys being on different teams, Jonas and Primoz. So it's gonna be great to see Primoz to see what he could do in his first race of the year, by the way, with bora-hansgrohe.
And it seemed pretty graphically obvious that there was too many cooks in the kitchen at the Vuelta for the jumbo-visma squads. By the way, they'll be called Visma Lisa Bike moving forward. Be that as it may, I am very happy that Roglic changed teams. Maybe he should have done that a year before. We could have seen a bigger battle in the Tour de France last summer, Christian.
No, yeah. I mean, there's so many instances where we could have said, well, this could be such a better race if these guys were split up a little bit. So 24, I mean, the races that we've already watched this year have been incredible. How fast it seems like every year, and we've been saying this, and I know it just gets old hearing me say this, but it's true. Last year, we think, where could they go from here? How can they raise the bar yet again? And it seems like the whole peloton has done that yet again. And it's going to be interesting to see what effect Primoz has in not in only himself on Bora, but the entire team. Many times you see a marquee rider go in there and they raise the bar for the entire team. And I think we've already seen that. We saw Danny Martinez flying already in Algarve. We saw Bob Jungels coming back to life. So 2 teammates that he won't have Danny, but he will have Bob Jungels. So it's going to be interesting to see how they could go, and not just for Paris-Nice, but for the biggest race of the Tour de France later on in the year. That's what we all have. This is Paris-Nice. A lot of times we think of this race as a mini Tour de France, but in March. Horrible weather, of course, usually in the 40s, wind, rain. But of everything, this is almost like a precursor to the big dog, which is the Tour de France.
And for my money, Primoz perhaps should have moved a little bit earlier to a different team. And be that as it may, it was a lot of speculation what would happen to Primoz after the Vuelta, especially last year. And then he wound up on board. Does that surprise you at all, Christian?
It doesn't surprise me, especially like you said. It could have been said that he could have moved earlier. He's a winner. This guy, you can't change a guy with this kind of mentality. It can't be taught. This guy, when he has his sights on objective, he does not miss. I was looking through some of his stats and what he does in the beginning of the season. He wins almost every objective he does, unless, of course, just a couple of years ago, he crashed on the last day. And that's the only reason he didn't win Paris-Nice that year. He made
Yes.
men's later. So he's either winning Tirreno Adriatico, he's winning Paris-Nice, and then he's winning Basque Country after that. This guy does not miss. He's getting up there in age, though, Bobby. I mean, he's going to be
Yeah.
35 years old. I mean, think about that. He's 11 years older than Remco. I mean, that's a lot of years. But considering that he does have 80 wins, and those are all big dog wins. They're not small races. These are all World Tour races pretty much every time. And the same can be said against Remco. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see this head-to-head battle this early in the season.
20 stage race wins in Primoz Roglic's career is impressive, and very likely to add another one at Paris-Nice. What's the purpose of Paris-Nice in the season? This year, it's interesting. We'll get to that a little bit when we look at the race course, looking at the bigger races further on in the year. But Paris-Nice, for my money, one of the most important races in the spring, and a big addition to anybody's list of wins if you want to be considered, a superstar cyclist.
No doubt about it. I mean, like I was saying a little bit earlier, it's a race that you really starting to see how good you trained or how bad you trained in the wintertime to really take inventory of yourself and your team going forward, race on French roads, have a couple mountaintop finishes, usually an individual time trial and a prologue 1,000 years ago when we raced. But now this year is going to have a team time trial just like they had last year. And then, of course, really just putting 8 days together early in the season and knowing what you need to work on. If you're doing good, that's great. If not, we need to regroup a little bit, and we have plenty of time before the Tour de France. So yeah, it is a little bit of a Tour de France. It's usually the race to the sun. Sometimes it has been raining down in Nice, but that's usually unlikely. But every time they start up in the north towards Paris, it's usually 45 degrees, usually a little windy. It's not nice. It's a race that I love to hate and hate to love. I mean, really, it's every year I come back to this race and just get your teeth kicked in after being in beautiful Tour of California, for example, or if you go to Oman, like many of these racers were just in the UAE Tour, for example, last week, and then coming to Paris and it's not nice out. So it could be a big shift, especially some of the Australian riders doing Tour Down Under. So this is another big race that we're going to see everybody, but everyone has to race in the same conditions. And here we are, Paris-Nice yet again. I can't believe it's already here.
Agreed there. Primoz Roglic very rarely misses when he has an objective, just like you said, Christian, but maybe one rider that would have high hopes of being able to do that. The other pre-race favorite, for my money, Remco Evenepoel, already successful on the season, had a big win to start out. Roglic's first race, does that maybe give Remco a little bit of an advantage in Paris-Nice, Christian? He's got some more race miles than Primoz does.
If it was anyone other than Primoz, I would say yes. But this guy, like we're just saying, he can prepare so well by himself, whether it's at altitude with a team or by himself at home in Slovenia. It doesn't really matter. This guy is always on point when he needs to be on point, and he doesn't go to a race to train. Those days are over for the majority of the peloton. That doesn't happen anymore. You have to be ready to go, or else you're just going to get slaughtered out there. So Primoz, I think he's going to be ready. But you're right, though. Remco looks so good. He destroyed the opposition in the time trial in Algarve. He won the overall. He wasn't fast enough at the top. Danny Martinez beat him 2 times in a row at the top of the climbs. And that's why I give the advantage to Primoz. Primoz is a bit quicker than Remco. If there's an individual time trial, for example, in Paris-Nice, maybe I would give the nod to Remco. Nonetheless, Remco almost has never even raced on French soil, Bob. You even tell me that you didn't think that he ever even raced a race, and I couldn't really find one as a professional where he had raced in France, apart from, of course, when he had a very horrible day in the Vuelta a España last year. We lost over a half an hour. So I'm sure he doesn't want to think about that. But this is all in preparation, again, for the Tour de France. He has this one, and then he has the Dauphiné, which is another precursor to the Tour de France in June. And then we'll see what he could do in the biggest race of them all in the Tour de France.
Yeah, and Remco's expectation, and I mean the hype around Remco in the Tour de France, that's another big headline in the offseason, is announced he will compete in the Tour for the first time. And Paris-Nice is a big rendezvous for that. But maybe Roglic, I would give him the advantage in Paris-Nice, at least team-wise. A very strong team for Bora, including Vlasov and, like you said before, Bob Jungels, Christian.
Yeah, good team. I mean, the team, Remco is not bad though either. I mean, even Van Wilder, Cataneo, these are very good riders, and they've already been racing. They've been racing very well. There's no doubt that they have his back, that being Remco, going into all these races. They know he's the prodigal son of Belgian racing, and he has the results to back it up. He's not a myth going forward. He's already won a Grand Tour. He's run some massive races, world champion. So he needs to have this at his back. They've changed the team dramatically over the years. Usually a sprinters team. Now they're becoming more of a GC team. So again, you have to go though to the biggest races to really prove, to see what you could actually do. And for Remco, he's been skirting around the Tour de France for a while now. He's still only 24 years old. It's not that long, of course, but he needs to go and see what he could actually do there. I think that, of course, he's a contender to see what happens, and very strong contender for the podium. That's for sure.
And who does it matter more, this Paris-Nice, Roglic or Evenepoel, do you reckon, Christian?
I think for Roglic. I think Roglic goes into every race like it's his last race, and I love the mentality of him. He's a killer, and of course the fact that we talked about him switching teams. So he wants to hit the ground running immediately with Bora and show his team that they made the right decision and scooping him up, paying a handsome, to first of all buyout to what was Jumbo and now is Visma Lisa Bike. So they have to show his worth and to his teams to have the backing of his teams. Like, for example, the guys like Bob Jungels and Vlasov that you just mentioned.
Jonas Vingegaard third in this race behind Tadej Pogacar last year, not participating, going to do some other stage races. But besides the two big guys, for my money, David Gaudu, who was second last year, by the way, in Paris-Nice, should be one of the top guys. Joao Almeida, Brandon McNulty, and Matteo Jorgenson, two young Americans, also might be in the mix, Christian. And I'm really looking forward to Paris-Nice. I think it's going to be a great race. It's going to give us an idea of who's going to be racing well throughout 2024.
Yeah, and Brandon McNulty, one of the names that you already brought up, has already been racing strong. He's already had 2 wins to his name, won the time trial at UAE, and then, of course, in Valencia, crushing everybody on the climbs. However, I will say I don't know exactly what happened on Sunday in the last stage of UAE. Both himself, Brandon McNulty, and Jay Vine were way off the back in a mountaintop finish where it should suit them and they should be fine. So I don't know if they're sick. So we'll see what happens. This is just the week before Paris-Nice. We don't know what's happening. They are on the start list going into Sunday's race. So hopefully they're okay. Hopefully they're fit and healthy. But that was very curious to see. I really thought that they were going to easily pull off the entire win. It's a massive race for their team, UAE. Obviously, it's a UAE and they're sponsored by UAE. So that's a big question mark for me. Brandon McNulty is incredible what we've seen him do in the biggest race in Tour de France and some of the smaller 1-week stage races. And Matteo, there's another big headline there, switching over from, of course, Movistar into Visma Lisa Bike. So that's going to be very interesting to see what he could do for GC.
Stages look like this, a couple of flat stages for the sprinters just outside of Paris. By the way, those roads will be featured in the Olympic time trials and road races a little bit later in the summer. And Christian, perhaps the most decisive of the early stages is stage number 4, very hilly, and then a tough climb to Mount Bruilly for the finish.
I 100% concur with that, Bob. And you got 11,000 feet of climbing. You have a day with many category 2 climbs. And of course, like you just mentioned, 3 kilometers at 7.7% to the finish line. So like we always say, the riders make the race, but if they decide that they're going to be an angry bunch that day, this could be the day where it really goes pear-shaped. Testing how strong some of the teams are, especially if you had the yellow jersey after the team time trial, this could be really interesting. A little bit of loop, and then, of course, like you said, right back on the Montpellier, and you can see that profile. Not nice. Got the category 1, and then back all the way to the category 2. Not nice at all.
Not nice at all. And just think if some crosswinds blow across stage number 4, that would be awesome.
We'd be too lucky to get the crosswind as well. But I think with all that climbing, I don't know if there's time for crosswinds on a day like that. But these are the kind of days that we're seeing in modern cycling. They don't necessarily need the above category climbs to make it epic. I think a lot of times you need those category 2s and 3s where people aren't as scared of it and just ready to just wing it. So that's one of those days that really has my attention, would have my attention as a bike racer, especially if I'm on the back foot, for example. Yeah. After the team time trial, my team doesn't do so good. We're going to just absolutely go for it in that first 40 kilometers in those climbs and really string out the brunch and see if we could put multiple people in the breakaway and really put the leaders' teams on the back foot. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to stage 4.
That looks like Primoz Roglic for me anyways, written all over stage number 4. Punchy climber, very difficult stage. The weather could be bad. That's got Primoz written all over it. I would imagine he makes a move on stage number 4, Christian.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to go for, what do they call it? The Roglification, they're calling it for the longest time in the Vuelta. Going for all those bonus seconds. Yeah. I mean, you think about whether it's available at the line every time, and good luck trying to outsprint him at the top of a climb. He's one of those guys who, when you think there's nothing left, he can always go one step deeper. He's Spinal Tap, putting it to 11 every time on the mountaintop finish. He's one of those guys. He just has always something a little bit more to pull from his body. And I don't think anything is going to be changing, just considering that he has different jersey and helmet on this year.
Another rider that we take a great interest in, who's also on a new team, Matteo Jorgenson, the young American, will be leading the GC charge for Visma, Lisa bike, formerly called Jumbo. I am really excited to see how Matteo can do in this week's race, Christian.
Yeah, I was speaking with him a little bit over text this morning. Obviously, he was not, or I shouldn't say obviously, but uh, after Paris-Nice last year, he was 8th place. He was not a happy camper, and he was quite upset about it. He put a lot of training into it by himself, by the way, and I think that's one of those that really led him to leave Movistar, just because he always had to do these camps by himself, so much training. Now he's racing with an incredible team, and they spent a month at the top in Tenerife and Teed. So he's ready to go. He was absolutely flying in opening weekend on the cobblestones. So yeah, I think that this is Matteo guy. He could do it all. He looks a lot like the George Hincapie of old, or Luke Rowe, where he has a pretty standard opening season where he has mostly classics focus with Roubaix and Flanders at the end, a big break, Dauphiné, and the Tour de France. So he's taken the place of some big riders, because Wout van Aert supposedly will not be at the Tour de France this year. So he's got some big shoes to fill, but he's got some serious class. Young guy, 24 years old. You saw him in full display last year, the Tour de France. And yeah, I'm very long when it comes to Matteo. I like this guy a lot, way mature for his years.
One event that hasn't really made a huge difference in time recently in the last couple of years, that used to be a big factor in GC aspirations for anybody, is the team time trial. That's coming back in Paris-Nice for stage number 3. What do you expect that to be like, Christian? And I think that, like we've seen in the last couple of years, not maybe big time gaps, but maybe significant for, at least for team morale.
No, I think so. I mean, I think it's gonna be tight. I really do. I think it's gonna be maybe spread out by 15 or so seconds over the top 3 or 4. I don't think much bigger than that, Bob. I really don't, unless it's really windy or cold, or the racing is incredibly hard leading into it. But there's only 2 stages, and they're most likely pretty easy for the most part, unless it's crosswinds on stage number 2. But yeah, I think team time trial is going to be pretty wide open, Bobby. It's not so technical. It's going to be how strong are your horses, and let's go. Most of these teams, like we were saying, have very strong teams, especially UAE on paper. Looking down, Almeida,
Yeah.
McNulty, Finn Fisher Black, Jay Vine, Grosjean, Niels Pollitt, and Mark Soler. Every one of those riders could win stages. And there you go. Look at the profile. It's really not much to talk about, pretty fast after that first time split right in the middle and all the way to the finish line. So I don't expect it to be massive. In the past, especially going to last year's stage race, I thought they were going to be really big, but I was dead wrong. Jumbo-Visma only won by 1 second over EF.
The visuals in the team time trial are spectacular. We'll see what the time gaps are at the finish line. Could get a little bit of an advantage, but like you said, Christian, I think stage number 4, and of course the closing weekend, 2 big days in the mountains around Nice, which will factor heavily in the Tour de France later in the summer. So the final weekend, as usual, should prove decisive. Tadej Pogacar, he was spectacular throughout, as he always is. But this year's Paris-Nice could be a lot closer than it was last year. INEOS is another team that, gosh, wasn't long ago, they dominated every stage race, or nearly every race that they entered. And now it seems like they're playing catch up to a number of other teams. Christian Rodriguez, who was 5th in the Tour de France, will be in their roster. Real question mark is Team INEOS in this year's Paris-Nice for me, Christian.
I think you're looking at me a little bit too much, Bob, with a big beard, but it's Carlos. Yes, Carlos Rodriguez, not Christian Rodriguez, but yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Carlos is a stud, isn't he? I mean, we saw him in the Vuelta
Carlos
2 years
Rodriguez,
ago.
yes.
And had a big crash, and then he had a big crash again with Sepp Kuss. Actually took Sepp Kuss out, let's be honest, on stage number 20 last year. He is a monster on the bike, and I didn't understand necessarily what they saw in him early with INEOS, but he's obviously one of the best riders that they have, especially for a general classification, even though the Egan Bernal is looking very good early this season. But yeah, they have a good team, not a great team. I don't know who they're going to be able to pull it off with, especially when the riders we've already mentioned seem like they're just a step ahead. But Carlos, or Christian, whatever you want to call him, Rodriguez, I think he's going to be up there.
And now let's talk the sprinters. A really good, maybe the strongest field of sprinters for any race so far this year, led by Olaf Koy, maybe Mats Pedersen, certainly, for Lidl Trek, having a spectacular season thus far.
Yeah, I think Olaf Koy, he's already got a win right now. I think he's one of the guys who's going to be one of the stronger, especially when you're talking to Matteo, like I was over text, like I said this morning. They're bringing him, thinking about the wins, especially, and they think about Affini leading him out, how strong he is, what he could do on the other. There are going to be some good. Arvid Decline, didn't know much about him. Actually raced for an American team of rally, but he's been very strong. What a big sprinter, a newcomer maybe, even though he's an older rider to look out for. Dylan Groenewegen, like you said, Mads Pedersen, Arnold DeLee, Bobby Jakobsen. I don't know. He's kind of been, he's been invisible, let's just say, up until now.
Yeah.
So there's a
Yeah.
lot of good sprinters, actually more than I thought, Bob, to be honest with you. I feel like many times some of the big sprinters go to the Italian races this time of year. They realize it's such a hard Paris-Nice, so much climbing that it's not worth it for them. But maybe looking at the lack of hills in the opening stages, they have some opportunity and they could go home if they want to over the weekend.
Speaking of the opening stages for the sprinters, presumably stage number one, however, pretty lumpy. 4 category 3 climbs throughout the proceedings, but stage number one, also the first leader's jersey up for grabs. For my money, this has got Mads Pedersen written all over it, Christian. Tough climbing day. See what the weather's like. If it's raining, I'm not betting on anybody else except Mads Pedersen.
Yeah, I wish I could disagree with you, but I cannot, Bob. And it's big old loop, like you said, pretty lumpy, almost 6,000 feet of climbing. So not the flattest, but not the hilliest. And there is a little bit of uphill in the last kilometer, 2.2% in the last kilometer. So that is usually for Mats Pedersen. He's one of those guys who's always coming across the line up in the podium, if not winning, especially if you think in the Vuelta España. So they're all, like we said, a lot of good sprinters here, but considering how fast he's been riding up until now this year, you have to have Mads Pedersen at the top of the list.
And a lot of these roads will be in the Olympic Games and the time trial and the road race later on in the summer. Stage number 2, very similar to stage number 1. And we're expecting the sprinters maybe only 2 opportunities throughout Paris-Nice. Stages 5 and 6, hillier, could possibly be a day for the sprinters in those 2 stages, but it might be the only 2 chances for the sprinters, days 1 and 2 in this year's Paris-Nice.
It all depends on the breakaways, doesn't it, Bob? I mean, these days, bringing back a strong break of 5 or 6 riders, if they get a big gap and the teams that with the sprinters don't really collaborate that much, there's no way you're bringing these guys back these days. And like you said, it's hillier, 7,000, 8,000 feet of climbing on the stages you just mentioned. It's interesting, but at the same time, these sprinters are so strong. Mads Pedersen, he could climb like nobody's business, and he's a bona fide sprinter. So they pretty much flatten the small hills these days with the speeds that they're going over. So I can't call it these days. I mean, it's what they decide and what the peloton decides on that day. Just like I said on stage 4, it's a hard stage. But if they decide they're going to go all out, yes, it could be shrapnel. But if they don't decide, if it's rainy or whatever, they just woke up on the wrong side of the bed and they just want to recover from their earlier days, then maybe it won't be that big. Who knows?
It's going to be awesome to watch the sprinters the first couple days and maybe throughout. I'm going to give you my podium, Christian, and then I want to hear yours. I'm going to say Roglic, Evenepoel, and Matteo Jorgenson for the podium. Any disagreement there? Or is there maybe a standout rider that we should have on our radar that we don't so far that we'll see in Paris-Nice doing really well?
Not that I would not. Okay, I'm going to agree with you on the first 2. After that, not that I would love to see Matteo Jorgenson up there in 3rd place. But if you wanted me to call somebody out from maybe not on the top of or tip of your tongue, Matthias Skelmos from Lidl Trek. That's a rider who's been riding strong and strong. He had a great Tour de France last year. Actually helped Mads Pedersen win the stage that he won when the uphill finish, just like it's very similar to what we're going to see on stage number 1. That'd be my rider that I'd put in 3rd place up there. Of course, Brandon McNulty, a massive wild card right now just because of the way he performed last weekend. I don't know if he's sick or not. But yeah, that would be mine one. If I'm going to say apart from Matteo, which I would love to see, or Brandon McNulty with massive bias to the United States, but I would put up another Dane, Matthias Skelmos.
All right. Well, that'll do it for Beyond the Podium, Paris-Nice preview. Join us Sunday, 9:10 a.m. Eastern, 3rd of March. Christian, I'm stoked to get the season started with you.
I can't wait to see it, brother. It's gonna be great, and say hi to Mrs. Claus, and or if we cell block C, wherever you are right now, Bobby.
From the library.